Okay. Yeah. Can we open those blinds? Well, just yank on the left side cord. All right.
Go. Yeah.
Okie dokie. Folks. Yeah, look.
Hey.
My bad, sorry.
Preach.
My fault.
Can we shut that door?
Yes, there you go.
All right, we are on chapter 2 here. This is 2.2, which would be page
41.
41?
Yes.
41, energy flow in an ecosystem. Section 2.2. Okay, when we're talking about energy flow, the basic idea is all organisms need energy. And they use the energy throughout their lives, moving around, catching food, repairing their cells, moving molecules around with their little vesicles, and remember those little motor molecules that slid along, the little microtubules, do you remember that?
Yeah.
All of that requires energy. Now, where does the energy come from? Well, the original source of all the energy in organisms is the sun. For almost every ecosystem, the sun is the original source of energy. So the sun shines down. It's absorbed by the leaves of the plants. What's the process of that? Photosynthesis, very nice. Photosynthesis absorbs the sunlight, takes the energy from the sunlight and fixes it into molecules. And then as the molecules are torn apart, the energy comes back out. And that allows things to move inside the cell and be repaired, and cells to do things, and the little actin and myosin filaments to pull and cause muscles to move and all that. So the original source is the sun. So energy goes into organisms basically through the sun and is passed along through what we call the food chain and food web. And we will take a look at these things and see how the energy moves. And eventually the energy comes back out of organisms. Do you know what form the energy comes back out of organisms as? The energy goes in as the sun and it comes back out somehow. Heat. It comes back out as heat. Can you feel your body's warm? That's actually the sun's energy. Isn't that weird? That's sun's energy. The energy is absorbed by the sun, it gets in the food, you eat the food, and it comes back out of your body as heat. Because heat is a byproduct of metabolism, of stuff happening in cells, some heat is given off. Whenever things move around, they rub against one another, they lose some energy, and it comes out as heat. So it goes into sunlight, comes out as heat. And we call this the food chain or the food web. And you may have seen this before. It works like this. The plant is known as the producer. That's the first level of the food chain. That's where the energy comes in and is absorbed. Producers do photosynthesis, absorb the sunlight. Then the producer is eaten by something. The herbivore, in this example, it's a grasshopper. The herbivore eats the producer. There's another name for the herbivore. It's called a consumer. If you eat, you're a consumer. If you absorb the sunlight and make the food, you're a producer. Questions? Now the herbivore gets eaten too by the next level. In this case, it's a mouse. They call the mouse an omnivore because the mouse can eat not only plants, they can eat plants and animals. But you could also call this a carnivore because it's eating an animal, in this case, a grasshopper. You could also call it a second-level consumer. The producer is eaten by the first-level consumer, and that's eaten by the second-level consumer. You could call it that. You could also call it a predator if you wanted to, because it catches something. And this snake is the third-level consumer, the carnivore. It eats the mouse. So that's an example of a food chain. Plant, grasshopper, mouse, snake. Level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. You ever heard of this before? It's not too difficult. Now, if you consider all the interactions between the organisms in an environment and the way they eat one another, we call it a food web. Because if you draw lines from one thing that eats something, see if a coyote doesn't just eat rats, it eats a bunch of things. It can eat a long-tailed weasel. It can eat a quail. It can eat a roadrunner. It can eat a rabbit. And so there's a lot of lines going back and forth, and the lines cross one another, and it looks kind of like a spider web. So they call it a food web when they're talking about all the different interactions between things. Food web is very complicated. Take a look. Sound?
In a community,
Sorry.
the desert community food web provides an example of complex feeding relationships between organisms.
Sorry. Okay, let's try it again.
A food web shows possible feeding relationships at each trophic level in a community. The desert community food web provides an example of complex feeding relationships between organisms at different trophic levels. The arrows indicate the flow of materials and energy. The first trophic level includes plants. Trophic level 2 includes insects and small organisms such as the kangaroo rat, red-spotted toad, the Texas horned lizard, and the jackrabbit. Trophic level 3 includes birds, snakes, and weasels. Trophic level 4 includes the top carnivore, the coyote.
When we say trophic level, we mean feeding level. That's what trophic means, feeding. And this brings us to the concept of an ecological pyramid. The ecological pyramids are made in such a way as to represent the number or weight or amount of energy contained in each trophic level, in each feeding level. For instance, if you were to go out into the area and weigh all the organisms in each feeding level, and that's the middle pyramid. This is a pyramid of biomass. The first trophic level, if you weighed all the plants out there, the first trophic level would be the heaviest. It's like go out into the forest and weigh all the trees and bushes. There's a lot of weight there. There's a lot of mass of producers. And so that has this big, thick block on the bottom. Now then, if you went out into the forest and weighed all the herbivores, the things that eat the trees, what eats trees in the forest? Do you know?
Beavers.
What's that?
Beavers.
Beavers eat trees?
Yeah,
I guess they do.
One try.
Insects. Insects are the major herbivores. They eat the leaves.
Deer.
Deer will eat the plants. That's correct. So if you weighed all them, you would get a lot less. And the reason why is because these producers, they use up a lot of the food themselves in moving their cells around and such. So there's a lot in the first level, and there's a lot less in the second level. I mean, think about it. A deer has to eat a lot of different plants. You have to eat a lot of different things just to sustain yourself. If you weighed the amount of food that you ate each year, it would weigh a lot more than you. So the bottom level has a lot, and the next level up has a lot less. And it goes down by about 90% for each level. The level below the one above it is about 10 times as big usually. So here we have 809 grams per square meter. I don't know if you know, this is square meter, about the size of this block here on the floor. And if you were to weigh all the producers that came up in a square meter, you have about 809 grams, which is a couple of pounds. And then if you weighed all the herbivores in a square meter, you only have 37 grams. And then if you weigh the secondary consumers in a square meter, you only have 11 grams. And then if you weigh the third level consumers, you only have 1.5 grams. So each level it goes less and less. Most food chains, food pyramids like this only have about 4 or 5 levels. Because there's just not enough energy to sustain organisms for more levels than that. We call that a pyramid of biomass. A pyramid of numbers is where you just count the number of organisms. 1.5 million plants in a grassland. This looks like a grassland. It's 1.5 million grasses in wherever they're counting. Only 200,000 primary consumers, 90,000 secondary consumers. Ooh, and they don't give a number for that.
1.
I don't know.
1.
1,000 maybe. Tertiary.
Like
We call that tertiary consumers. And here is a pyramid of energy. We can see the energy gets about 10 times less at each level. Ecological pyramids. So here's a guy, it's kind of a boring voice, but it explains it really well. And by the way, if you roll the essay for this chapter, I think this is what you're writing about, food chains and food webs.
Right after this, I use the restroom.
Yes.
An ecological pyramid arranges organisms with similar feeding habits into trophic levels. Plants make up the first trophic level by transforming sunlight into organic molecules that support the entire ecosystem. Since plants use some energy for their own metabolism, they reduce the net available for the next level, the herbivores. Likewise, the energy used or released by herbivores reduces the energy available to support first-level carnivores. In fact, only about 10% of the energy in one trophic level is transferred to the level above it. Less energy means less biomass, which supports fewer organisms at higher levels of the food web.
Here's an example of an AP biology question they asked to test your understanding of this concept. See if you can get it. If you were going to feed as many people as you could, and you had some land, would you A, grow rice on the land and feed the people rice? Or B, grow grass on the land, put cows on the land, let the cows eat the grass, and then feed the people cow meat? Which would support the most people?
The rice. The rice.
And if you look at the pyramids, you see, whoops, hold on. You look at the way the pyramids are, putting rice on the land feeds a lot more people because there's a lot of rice on the field. If you weighed all the rice, it'd be a lot more than if you weighed the cows that feed on the rice. That's why in places that have huge populations, they don't eat much meat. That's why China, people eat rice. Because if you had cows eating grass on your land and then tried to feed the people cows, there wouldn't be enough food for everybody. Is that interesting? Okay, here's the boring voice guy, but this really explains it really well. If you were to write what he says here, you'd probably get a 10 on the essay.
An ecosystem is a stable ecological unit composed of a living biotic component of interacting organisms and a non-living abiotic component that consists of physical factors of non-living parts of the environment. To be maintained, an ecosystem must have a steady input of energy. The source of energy for most ecosystems is the sun. The sun's energy is trapped and then transferred from one organism to another. The sequence of organisms through which energy and nutrients flow is a food chain. The food chain begins with plants, which are the producers in the food chain. During photosynthesis, plants use the sun's energy to produce sugars and
Whoops.
Maybe he got bored or something.
What's happening
compounds from the atoms found in their environment.
here? Sorry.
Thus, in our example, plants are the first class of organisms to capture energy entering the ecosystem and use it for growth and reproduction. In relation to this flow of energy, the plants are classified as trophic level 1. The energy in trophic level 1 can be transferred to other organisms when the plants are consumed. The animals that eat producers, such as plants, can be referred to as primary consumers. Primary consumers make up trophic level 2 in the food chain. Mice are the primary consumers in our example. Animals called predators get their energy by eating other animals. A predator, such as a snake, becomes a secondary consumer when it eats a mouse who was a primary consumer. Secondary consumers make up trophic level 3. The animals in the third trophic level are often food for other predators. In our example, hawks prey on the snakes and thus form trophic level 4. They are the top predator in this food chain since no other predator eats them. So in this example, the food chain consists of 4 trophic levels. As energy passes from one trophic level to the next, approximately 90% is lost. This flow and loss can be expressed as an ecological pyramid. Ecological pyramids may represent either the number of organisms, the biomass, or the amount of energy found.
Nope. Okay. Well, that was good. Even though it was boring, he explained it really well. Questions about food chain? Food pyramids? Trophic levels?
What did you say trophic means again?
Trophic means feeding. Trophic level 1, trophic level 2, 3, 4. And it usually doesn't get past 4 or 5. There's just not enough energy. So you could call these autotrophs or producers, herbivores, carnivores, top carnivores. And where are we?
Top carnivore. The herbivore.
Depends what you're eating.
Carnivore.
If you're eating a salad, you're an herbivore. If you're eating rice, you're an herbivore. If you're eating meat, you're a carnivore. That's why we're called omnivores, because we can feed at any level.
So there's like a ladder.
The only one we're not
In autotrophs.
is autotrophs, because we can't make our own food. We have to eat. Okay?
You do stress.
All right. What I want to do today is I'm starting a video that we won't be able to finish, but we might finish it the next time. Yes, save those changes. It's about the environment. And one thing that's happening to our environment is pollution and use of our resources. And the reason why this is happening, the reason why pollution is a problem today, and pollution has not been a problem for very long. Pollution has only been a problem recently. And it's because if you look at the human population, it's gone like this. For the longest time on Earth, there were only 20, 30, 40 million people. In the last, since really the Industrial Revolution and since modern medicine, the population has gone up. We have 6 billion people now.
John, turn this off, or are you still?
Yeah. Let us out.